Oi, 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 welcome back. Today is going to be a little bit different. Project Rat Bike is underway. It's now all black and I'm now contemplating all sorts of fabulous things, fabrication, welding, decoration and reconstruction, all sorts of stuff, and that's to come. But today, as the title says, this is going to be more about the other bikes. Now, we've got a little box of bits and pieces. Obviously, wages mounts up. We've invested in some cool farkles for the Bonneville and the Scrambler, and they're going to be coming up in the next little few videos. So today, what I want to do is, if you remember, we did the headlight brackets on Penny's Bonneville. I think they're fantastic, those gorgeous little billet brackets, and I've still got the pressed tin ones on the Scrambler, and they won't do. So I'm going to replace those today, which involves also relocating the ignition switch to the side of the frame. And something that I'm getting awfully nagged about is sealing the wiring properly when you put that switch effectively upside down. So there we are. Stick around, stay tuned, see what happens. Welcome back. Right, so as you can see, this is the task at hand today, to eliminate these. They're a little bit cack, they really are. Sort of cheap, nasty, pressed out tin, 50p's worth. They also hold the ignition switch all in one, which is cool, okay, but it's, if you take this off and relocate it, this then is left. Not so bad on the Bonneville because it's mounted through this centre section and you can just simply put a bung over it if you want to retain these, but you can't retain these without taking it off first, going around the back. There are spot welds right around the back on the inside that you have to drill out and then plug up. It's a nasty mess, so I'm going to take that whole thing off altogether, relocate that, and what we'll do, what we'll have at the end of it, is what we did with Penny's, which is these. These are rather lovely, absolutely delicious Motone items. Here we are. We are, that way round even. As you can see, they are gorgeous machined billet, just one bolt around the front that bolts in from the inside, and they fit beautifully over the forks. They slide down beautifully and they're just so much nicer. They're quite chunky, they don't look flimsy at all, they fit in with the bike, and they're so much nicer as an option than this. They really are. That is just awful. I don't know why they do it. Perhaps it's a retro thing. Even when you look on the back, you see in the back here, probably can't see in the light, there's kind of a pressed seam there where they're kind of spot welded together into one piece. Just awful, nasty rubbish. So that's coming off. Going to change them today, which involves taking off the top yoke. So let's get the sky hook deployed and get the top end off. First task is to get inside the headlight, because relocating the ignition switch involves moving it effectively further away from where it currently is, which means you need to express a little bit of the wiring out of this headlight bucket, in which it is completely packed solid, so that you've got enough extra room. And it's 2 bolts underneath that hold the whole lot in. Right, so you just got to get hold of the loom at the back, kind of give it a wiggle. There it is. So that shows you that's the plug for the ignition switch there, which you just need to unplug, reroute and move so that effectively I've got enough slack. There's loads of wiring in there, it kind of goes in a big circle, so I can use, I just hope that doesn't end up outdoors where I've then got to heat shrink it. Right, this is boring, come back in a minute. Right, just drop the switch itself off the bracket. You can just relocate it completely. These bolts afterwards you won't need them because it locates into a threaded body on the new clamp. Here we are. Right, so once it's free, let's take it out of there completely. There we are, nicely removed. one ignition. Right, let's pop it down the other side. Okay, right, on location now. Now this is the motone bracket. You've seen these, we mounted one on Penny's bike, and that goes in those two bolts there, and that produces a lovely little area for this to sit. All the back of the switch sits nestling right in here out the way. It's lovely. Now normally the switch is mounted in that position with the wiring facing back out the way. When it's up on that top, effectively this wiring is facing forward, but it's down out the way, out of the weather. The problem we have here is if you mount it in that correct manner, or in that preferred manner, so this exit area here is hidden and away from the weather, then the wiring isn't long enough. What you need to do is turn the switch upside down, so you then have this direct route for the loom that goes up into the headlight, and you've got plenty of slack. It gives you about 4 inches more slack if you mount it up the other way. So you effectively do have to mount the switch upside down, and that produces one issue, and that is that this area here, this area of the switch, lives now here facing pretty much upwards and forwards right in the weather blast. So let's show you what we're going to do with that. There we are. Now all I'm using here, because you will ask, is Grenville sealing silicone. All this is the kind of stuff you buy. You can see the picture. I've got this in a car accessory shop for sealing around your light lenses. There's a picture of it there, sealing a windscreen. It's a general purpose black silicone sealant. I would not use the stuff for your bathroom, which comes in a big long mastic tube. You don't need that much. You can buy this. This was just a couple of pounds a tube, and it is brilliant stuff. Absolutely. And all you do with this, it's getting close. It's in round here, round this base, that you need to seal the switch to stop the water getting in, because it's going to be facing upright. You don't need much. That is it. Just a little squirt of this stuff. It's very, very good. It doesn't crack and come off. You don't need to absolutely smother it all. You certainly don't need to seal around here. I've never known that. Pour water in. It's just that the way that was facing upwards. There we are. Just a little bit in the back. It's already getting a little bit too messy. Let me just clean this up. And there we are. It's just a case of making sure that now that this is going to be facing upwards into the weather, that no water is going to get down inside there, down in the back of the switch, corrode everything up, and mean that you then need to go and buy a new one of these, which costs £1 million from your Triumph dealer. You might get a discount, but honestly, you don't need to be replacing it. Just before I put that back together, I'll show you this little trick for you. You go and buy a tube of this, guarantee you've used one little squirt like I just have, and then that will dry down as far as there, because it's air dried and you can't access it. So all you do, pop a little bit of tape around the top like that, completely seal it, just seal the air out. Looks a bit ugly, but I tell you what, when you come back to that to use it again, that will be still nice and wet and juicy and usable, which saves you money. There we go. Tip number 66. Seal up your sealant. No Loctite on the end of that, and that's a frame bolt, but I'm going to put some on just because I can. Again, if in case you ask, I'm going to use this Loctite 248, and it's the stick type thread lock. Not too much. Always use the blue, don't use the red, because the red is permanent. That's pretty much like welding it in, and it's only really meant for applications that are never going to come undone. Doesn't need much. Just a little bit like that. Fill up the threads. Job done. I've routed this and plugged it back in so that I've got plenty of slack, and I'll rebuild the headlight in a sec. This is just the first part of doing the headlight ears. I'm going to marker paint those in a minute, but that is done. Right, let's move up, rebuild the headlight. Alright, look, just an important point. When you put, if you're going to do this yourself, I wiggle the wire. You see in the back there, that's the switch. That's the wire to the ignition switch. There's a good curve to the wire before it's pulled straight. If I pull it straight, there's all that slack. I'd say you need probably about 4 inches of free play movement so that when you turn the bars, obviously now you've mounted, this was initially mounted on the headstock and it turned with it so the wiring could stay static. Now you've mounted it on the frame, so effectively the wiring itself has to flex and become long enough so that when you're on full left lock, that's not pulling and starts yanking the plug undone, or worse still, pulling the wires out the back of the socket. So make sure you've got plenty of room in there and there's nothing in the way. What I've done is moved all this wiring, I've recoiled it to one side out the way and left that area at the back free. It's a very important point. You can do this yourself. Make sure that where you end up leaving the plug like that, it has a lovely space to boogie around in all on its own and it's not tight. Test it on full lock to the left and you'll know. So just turn the bars both ways and make sure there's no pinching or snagging or anything like that and nothing's catching. Right, I'm literally going to do this the easiest way possible. To take these out, get rid of all this completely, these just slide off the top of the fork legs. Now all of this doesn't have to be touched really. You don't have to take the bars, you don't have to unsettle your perfect set bar position that you're happy with. You don't have to take anything off really, just the 2 pinch bolts that hold the yoke on and the center bolt. Now the center bolt's the issue, or this big center nut. Go and get yourself the right size socket. I just went and bought a 30mm Draper Expert socket, cost me £8 I think that was, and then that fits on and you can then undo it easily without any stress. Sit quite tight but not too much. Don't worry too much about the hefty tools. Once that nut, that capping nut is out the way, you don't need to do anything else to the stem. Then it's just pinch bolts. And you literally just back those off so they're finger loose. You don't have to take them out, they're not on a keyway or anything. Now you can go on to Triumph Rat, anywhere like that, and you can find all the torque settings for all these fasteners. Now at this point, you just use the end of your bars, give the whole lot of wiggle, and watch, look, it just comes clean off. Then all you do, you grab a sky hook on that side, and on that side, and just lift it up, and that's it, you're free. And here we are. Take the bolt out of the way, and that's it, completely free. Let's do the other side. And the headlight will just sit there and then they're free to move. Right. And at that point you can then withdraw the offending piece of pig iron there and a little rubber gasket at the bottom. You don't need that either. And then we can clean them all up and prepare to slip the new ones on. It's as easy as that. Just cleaning them up because obviously they've been hidden inside there since the bike was new. Any corrosion, it just comes off in one go before you put your nice new blingy ones on. Right, let's get the new ones. Okay, and there we are. And just to say it again, these are absolutely gorgeous. All machined from one big chunk of billet. That must have been a pile of swarf big enough to fill a bin bag, just boring that hole out. That was one solid block originally. And these are gorgeous. They aren't cheap, but then cheap ain't good and good ain't cheap. You know how it works. I think they are beautiful. The original factory bolts go in there, and these go in the back, and you don't have to Loctite these, you really don't. Steel, stainless steel into alloy, just nip them up, they're fine. Right, let's get them fitted. Beautiful. And then carefully put that on. And just so that, just enough nip, even that cracky, they need almost nothing at all. They grip with all that friction, all that metal that touches, huge amount of grip. They don't need to be nipped up really tight or anything. Get around to it is. And all we do first, just mount them up, get everything located, hand loose. Don't do any of it up yet. Nice and loose. That's it. Let's get you out of there. The yoke back on. And it just locates over the forks. There we are. Get the sky hooks out of the way. Right, once everything's in place, leave these loose because you want the forks to be able to move, or you want this to be able to move on the forks without any issue. Pop the washer back on, shiny side up, top nut back on. That's a big old nut that. It's only shallow, but it's a big nut, and it has a rather tremendous torque setting of 90 Newton meters, which is quite a lot, so do as we're told. Now I'm not giving you all of the torque settings because you can look them all up, they're all online. I just wanted to make it clear that these particular ones are quite important, and it's important to do that up first so that you can pull the yoke down onto the bike, down onto the steering stem, into its proper position before you start doing the side pitch bolts up. If you do those up first, quite obviously it won't pull down properly. You'll be left with a gap. Let's just clip this into place. That is a hell of a tool. Right, okay, that's done. Now nip up these. Right, here we are, off the road now. I think you might agree that looks a lot better, an awful lot better. Quite important job, just with this, check for slack. You've obviously set it up as best you can, but you've got to do these things on full lock. That's what it's about. Check that you get full lock there, and at full lock you're still slack with no pulling. There's the wires up there. We can't see them very well. Let's just slide on in. Can't really see them in the dark there, but the wires down there are not pulled at all. There's loads of slack. I've got another couple of inches of slack if I need it. And also, more importantly, or as important, make sure that when you come around on this lock, nothing catching or slicing lumps out of it. I had it on the Bandit when I sent it to my mate. It's a bit embarrassing. When it went lock to lock, it sliced one of the wires on the lock stops. Very important. It's just fiddling about to get it right, so you know you get full lock with no issues. Okay, there we are, and all of that nice and tight, and there we are. I think you might agree, a little bit better than it was. Certainly nicer in my book. The other thing, finally, with this stuff, don't just chuck it in the drawer and forget about it. It is valuable. It does have value whether you're going to use it again or not. Stick all the fasteners that you've not used, all the factory fasteners, neatly in a bag. Use one of the bags that the new stuff comes in, and keep these safe. I'm going to wrap these up in paper, and we've got a box upstairs in the house with all the standard parts for both bikes, so they're completely safe for the future. Even if we don't own the bikes in 10 years time, all this stuff will have value to those who restore them. 20 years down the line. That's the sort of thing that your dad wished he did with these old Bonneville pipes. Right, there we go. Purdy? I think so. Right, now this is, do you want to make a couple of points about this? Just for what it's worth, the relocator to stick your ignition switch on the right hand side is £25 and the brackets are £89. Now, £89, I mean obviously you need the relocator as well, so you know you're paying well over £100 for this, but yeah, it's a lot of money, but this is what we save up for, this is what we go to work for. This is the point. You can put crappy parts on your bike. If you look at the market for these machines at the minute, you look at the ones the dealers are selling. If you go to any of the dealer websites, they'll have a bespoke, hate doing rabbit ears, but that it is so fits, bespoke handmade Triumph. What it is, it'll be a Scrambler. They'd have wrapped the pipes and put a brown seat on with Barber on the back or something, or Badger or whatever, stick an exhaust on it, an arrow, and suddenly it's a bespoke, one-of-a-kind David Beckham bike and it's worth 11 grand. Have a little look, they're all out there, very comical. They're rubbish, they're not worth it at all. You can go and buy the bike, put those parts on yourself and save yourself a couple of grand, but there are people out there buying them. Now, it brings me a very special point. I don't want to lecture on this, I don't want to yarn on, but the principle here is, if you're going to farkleize your bike, if you're going to put extras on it, you're going to gimp it up and change it, take off the factory parts, like I said just now, keep the factory parts safe because it's very important. Passing them on proves that the bike wasn't crashed. You didn't buy a wrecker and do it up. You actually just changed the lovely original bike. And if in the future you want to put it back to original and keep all your parts for the next bike you want to upgrade to, you can do that. So it's a worthwhile thing to do. Often you won't get much on eBay for them compared to what they cost new, especially new factory parts. The other side of it is the quality of the parts you fit. 90 odd pounds for a set of headlight brackets. Yeah, you can probably buy them for a third of that, but would you want to? Really? What's your bike worth? In my personal view, the quality of the parts you put on your bike make the difference between whether you make the bike more valuable or less. If you're taking off factory parts and you're putting on cheap rubbish, you're going to make your bike worth less money, and to be honest, I think you embarrass yourself. You're better off waiting, saving up. Honestly, I've had that bike 19 months. We did pennies ages ago and we couldn't afford another set of headlight brackets. I've just been able to get them and put them on now. That, in my view, is a better way to do it. When you see a bike for sale, you look at it and you look at the value of parts. When you see any of these machines for sale, these Bonneville, Scrambler, Thruxton bikes, you look at them and the ones that are more value, more expensive, it's about the parts that are put on them. We've now got Talon hubs, DID rims, stainless spokes. The exhaust is still a cheapo, that'll get done in the future, but the little things like these brackets here, the relocator bracket, the shocks on the back, all that kind of thing. If I'd want to put Olin shocks on, yeah, but I just can't afford them. I'd love to have, but I can't afford them, so I got the tech ones. But the little things like that you can afford, and I think it's a great way to make your bike worth more money, and it's nicer for you too. I love them, they look great. They make the front end look a little bit more kind of street and chunky, not quite so standard. And those pressed brackets, they're just hateful. I've never liked them, but I knew I could take them off and I knew I could replace them when I bought the bike, which is why I've done it that way. So there we are. Now I've got a few other things to do. There's a little box of parts, as I said, we saved up. We've got a little box of parts come, so we've got some videos to roll along with this, and they'll all be reasonably interesting if you're going to do this stuff yourself. If you're not sure on any of it, I mean, there's that job, for instance, taking off the top yoke might seem a little invasive, a little bit scary, pulling all your steering apart, but as you saw, it's not difficult, certainly not complex, as long as you take your time. And I went on to, what was it, something like triumphindia.org, and they have an enormous list of torque settings. You just reel them all off, and they're all correct. I'll check them with Triumph, they're absolutely correct. So you can look up the torque settings, you can buy a torque wrench, you can do it all yourself. And there's some nail varnish, marker paint the bolts, you know, we've said all this before. Get stuck in, make your bike your own, stamp your own mark on it, that's what it's all about. Headlight brackets, cool. Thanks for watching, see you next time.